Hello? So I don't have that stuff to read in front of me. Sorry. If you pull it up, I'll read it. Okay. You're muted.
Hello.
There you go. I hear you now.
Yay.
I hear you. I see you. I see you dance. I did not text Terry on his phone.
Okay. Were you supposed to?
Well, he evidently didn't get the meeting invite and the agenda, so he didn't know that there was a meeting tonight. Oh, here he is. Hi, Terry.
Hi, Kelly.
I'm glad you got the info.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah. It seems the internet seems weak tonight. It seems slow. I'm across the street from German American.
Okay, cool. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, how are you?
Good. You're early. We have a couple of items of business to go through before it's your and Mauricio's turn.
Great. What time do you want me to join? I wouldn't mind just taking my dog out for outside real quick.
Like 10 after, 12 after?
Yeah, let me just do that because my dog's been pretty patient. I've been kind of stuck doing other stuff. So I'll join back at about 7:10, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you.
You bet.
Andrew's from Peabot.
Thank you. I was going to ask that.
He's the one that sent the email about the paved streets with curbs and the percentage in Rose City Park and citywide. And I don't know, Tamara, if you saw the email, but Ray has invited the school principal from Rose City Park to join the meeting.
I did see that.
Do you think we're going to go till 9 o'clock tonight?
I don't know.
I only say that because I'm going out of town in the morning, and I'm somewhat prepared, but not totally.
Well, hopefully the rest of the members will join us. Jenny will not be here tonight. She is going to be drinking green beer, I believe.
Mm.
And I'm trying to be happy for her.
Yeah.
Well, Sharon told me she might have a beer after dinner, and then she wouldn't want to join the meeting. So I don't know whether she did or not.
Hi, Sharon.
Hey, that was a funny sound to announce it, Sharon. Did you
Yeah,
make that? Did you make that sound?
nope. Not I. The web link that was sent via email does not work.
Really? I
Had
clicked
to
on
go on the website,
Oh, it worked for me.
had to go on the website and use that one. It did not work twice.
strange.
Apparently, there's some kind of band practice here at the German American Society. People are walking by with instruments.
Okay, we're right on time. Anyone else that you think, is Zach going to show up?
Jack is there.
Oh,
You see his cute face?
Hello.
there he is.
Good evening, everyone.
There. Now I have a full screen.
Ben cannot come.
Okay. All right. well,
Others, it's a bad day to have this, but here we are.
Here we are. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Tamara DeRitter. I am the co-chair of the Land Use and Transportation Committee for the Rose City Park Neighborhood Association. And I'd like for us to go around the screen and introduce each ourselves, and I'll turn it over to Kelly.
Kelly Davis, co-chair with Tamara of the Land Use and Transportation, and also a board member. Terry, your turn.
Terry Parker, board member, Land Use and Transportation Committee member, and rep to CNN for the Land Use Committee on their LU&TC committee. Sharon?
Sharon Fuchs, Land Use and Transportation Committee member, and it looks like Ben did get on. Ben?
Hello.
Want to introduce yourself, Ben?
Hi, I'm a neighbor. I live on 64th, just off of Sacramento.
Hey, Zachary?
My name is Zachary Lauritsen. Happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody. I'm one of the Land Use and Transportation board members or committee members. Susan, you want to go next?
Sure, I'm Susan Ferguson. I live at 61st in Sacramento. And I'll pass it over to Michael.
Hi, I'm Michael Bacon. I'm the Rose City Park Elementary School principal.
Welcome.
Paid here to be here by Ray. So,
Okay, Ray, next.
Good evening. Raymond Saul, longtime Rose City Park resident. And I was the one that initiated this discussion about completing the infrastructure in our neighborhood. So I'm eager to hear answers from city staff.
Okay. Andrew, are you with us? Would you like to introduce yourself, Andrew?
Andrew is taking his dog out.
Okay. How about Sarah? Sarah Crooks, are you there?
I am Sarah Crooks. I also live on Sacramento between 61st and 62nd, and it's my dog who's barking, so I'm going to go back on mute. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Gee, I blame you, Sharon, darn it.
Okay. Kelly, do you have the agenda to pull up so we can look at the agenda for tonight? I can also do it verbally.
Go ahead.
Okay. At tonight's meeting, we've got to review the minutes from the February 22nd meeting. We also, after the welcome and introductions, we have land use acknowledgement and neighborhood agreement. And then agenda approval, then the minutes, and then new business, new items from the committee members, conflict of interest statements, if any, outstanding small business district in Rose City Park. I'm not sure what that means, but we'll work on that. Unimproved streets is then with Mario, and we also have the principal here tonight. So Mario Leclerc, Mauricio, excuse me, Leclerc, and Andrew Abbey. And then that's followed by update on slow streets for Sacramento. Then we have the crosswalk with bollards at 62nd. Regarding the next steps on that. Latest dialogue with Scott Cohen and 64th and Brazil redesign. I think that's a little bit of the same stuff. Anyway, updates, then intersections of impaired sightlines. Broadway and 47th was brought up. We have land use and transportation email list, contact information, streetcar on Montgomery Park to Hollywood, the Hollywood hub, Alameda at 57th, which is got new information on that, and then check in with members of concern. Given that we have a couple folks here for probably Sacramento, as well as the unimproved streets, sidewalks. I think that would be what we need to talk about.
So
do we need to move that up to new business, or how do you want to run it?
can we move up the unimproved streets discussion with Mauricio and Andrew and Raymond, and then we can go back to the minutes and other new business items.
And then go back to the minutes. Okay.
And Tamara?
Yeah.
I want to bring up, I don't know how to say this, but a crash that occurred on Monday, fairly close to me, and how it relates to slow streets.
Okay. Maybe.
I mean, I could do it under slow streets. I just wanted to be sure that I had, you know, maybe 3 minutes to bring it up.
Okay, I'll put you under there. Okay, we've got a request to go ahead and move Mauricio up to after we do the introduction part and put it above the review of the minutes and then new business. Is there a second for that?
I'll second.
Okay, got a motion then second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Okay, it passes. All right, so at this point, I'd like to go ahead and share the screen for the land use acknowledgement information that we've got. Uh-oh, you've got to enable me to do so.
Oh, sorry. Go.
Okay, here we go. Okay, this is a land use acknowledgement statement that the Rose City Park Board approved in November of this past year. As a neighborhood, we acknowledge the unceded land we occupy and its original inhabitants included Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Clackamas, Bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapua, Malala, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia River. Currently united as the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, the community includes over 30 tribes and bands from Western Oregon, Northern California, and Southwest Washington. We acknowledge that this land was seized through coercion, dishonesty, and brutality. We acknowledge the violent history of Euro-American settlement that sought to extinguish indigenous life from this land. We acknowledge the enduring influence of that history on our region and the nearly 70,000 Native people descended from over 380 tribes living here today. Many of the major roads in Rose City Park neighborhood connected Chinook villages between the three rivers, which were white colonizers called the Columbia, the Willamette, and the Sandy, instead of honoring the older names such as Nichiwana, which means Great River, for the largest of the three. As our mission statement says, Rose City Park Neighborhood Association works to build a safe, equitable, and healthy environment for all neighbors, present and future. Kelly, you want to help me with the neighborhood agreements?
Okay, in June 2021, the Rose City Park Neighborhood Association Board adopted the following neighborhood agreements based on the community agreements from the Done for DIDI White Labor Collective and agreement principles from the Historic Albina Advisory Board in June 2021 for all of its activities, including but not limited to meetings, emails, and publications. So these are the highlights. We will take collective and individual ownership. We will center and prioritize the most marginalized voices. We will assume best intentions. We will bring our best intentions. We will use ouch and oops to identify harms and to swiftly apologize. In reply, we will take space and make space. We will listen for understanding and remain respectfully engaged. We will deal with issues, not with people. We will be willing to experience discomfort in difficult conversations, and we will expect that difficult issues will not be fixed quickly, but we'll continue our work to support and engage our neighborhood and related communities.
Thank you. Okay, at this point in time, let's move it over to the topic of working on incomplete streets.
So Raymond, do you want to do a quick introduction as to how the neighborhood is dealing with this tonight?
Well, I guess I could summarize the letter that you and I sent to the city engineer more than a month ago. The concern stems from the fact that this is a long-established neighborhood with most of the sidewalks and street improvements in place. And yet it's peculiar that the streets that provide access to our two parks have not been fully improved, specifically without sidewalks, which poses a danger for pedestrians and especially children to gain access to the parks. The other problem is that the one street, Northeast Tillamook, is unimproved, not fully improved, without sidewalks. And as a consequence, traffic is overburdened on Northeast Thompson, which is adjacent to the Rose City Park Elementary School. And that stretch of Thompson is an especially dangerous stretch because there are 3 blind intersections as a result of the steep slope. So it seems to me that it's really almost an emergency to finally complete Tillamook as well as all of the other streets. The other thing that's simply annoying is that the city has never improved the frontages of the parks in the neighborhood. Consequently, there's no sidewalks along Rose City Park around its perimeter. Neither are there sidewalks, in fact, adjacent to Normandale Park. Normandale at Northeast 55th, the city has never even improved the street. It looks like a third world road. So if I sound annoyed, it's because I am, that this neighborhood keeps waiting for these improvements to be made. And as we stated to the city engineer, we understand that it's the responsibility of the property owner to complete these things. And that for the last 100 years, it has been city policy that the developer of a property needs to fully complete the adjoining right-of-way as a condition of approval. So the puzzling thing is, how is it that these streets that lead to our parks were never completed and the adjoining property owners never required to do so, and that the city permits this to continue? So, gentlemen, I'm ready for some answers.
So just one more thing to say, in addition to what Raymond said, is this is kind of information gathering for us. And we really appreciate you two coming, Andrew and Mauricio. So we have no idea how to go about this. And we really appreciate the city engineer asking you two to join us. So if you could tell us a little more about how we might go about this, it would be really helpful.
Kelly, can I just say one thing?
Sure.
Raymond said one thing that wasn't quite true. A developer does not necessarily have to improve the frontage if they put money into a fund, and that if the property, the rest of the street is not improved, they do not have to, they just put money into a fund for improvements. That's, at least that's my understanding. And this, maybe the city engineer or somebody can verify what I'm saying here, but that
I doubt if that's the case in this situation, but that's fine. We'll find out.
Right. So thank you. I am Mauricio Leclerc. I'm a planning manager. I manage a section of the planning division and deals with area and project planning. And with me is Andrew Abbey, who manages the LID, Local Improvement District program for we both work for the Portland Bureau of Transportation. So we're here, we got the letter, and we'll try to have a conversation actually with you about the situation in your area, work on, understanding the terminology, there are some things we can learn together there, understand the situation and the context of this relative to city priorities, and then look for ideas. How can we advance this stuff? So what we are not is we're not parks employees. So we can have a discussion about the park situation, but we certainly cannot speak for them. And it probably looks to me like as a follow-up item of this. So unless I missed something, Andrew, maybe I can just provide an introduction. So I'm a planner. I have a team working on all over the city. This area is I have not worked on. However, I did go around. I visited the area 2 days ago. It began to rain quite hard, and experienced the potholes and the puddles and all that. So I drove pretty much every street, including the perimeter of the park, which has a very unique street layout. I was quite surprised by it, that on the west side, the street is very narrow. Perhaps there wasn't a street when it first got built, but then the southern street, Hasolo and 57 are quite wide. My guess is probably to accommodate some parking. Maybe the parks decided to prioritize those two streets at the expense of the other. However, very, very interesting. Of course, there are people living there in the Hasolo area, so by the Catholic Press. And then I did notice an improved streets. I did notice some new development at 53rd in Multnomah, in which the property owner was the developers put sidewalks. They live there. They look fairly new, but not much has happened in terms of redevelopment. So the area is pretty much how the gentleman Raymond described. It seemed to the condition is worse off on the east side of 60th, but the issue is true on both sides of the 60th. So So I did that. So I understand a little better the situation and I understand better the letter that you sent. So in terms of terminology, Andrew had to remind me that an improved street is a vague term. It's not an official term that we use in our asset management. We have paved streets, which are the ones that have sidewalk and paved. We have paved streets without curbs and unpaved without curbs. I think those are it. Correct me if I got it wrong, Andrew. So in this case, I think that provides context. We have a lot of streets in the city in which you just have nothing, no paved streets at all, no sidewalks. In this case, what I saw was, I think, in pretty bad shape, some of them, admittedly, but we have, I would think the situation was paved streets without sidewalks. But of course, I saw a lot of poor conditions of the pavement, and I think Andrew has an inventory that is more detailed as to what is the condition of those streets. So we have, I don't know if I can share the screen. Can I share something? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, let me see if I can do that. So let me just go there. Let me see if I can do. Can you see this map?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, cool. So maybe I can navigate around, yeah, let me move it maybe to the bottom. So this is where we are, let's see, LTIC. So somebody mentioned Terry. Hey, Terry Parker, how are you?
Pretty good.
Yeah. So basically, LTIC is local improvement, local transportation. There it is. Local transportation infrastructure charge. I can put that in. I can provide these links to you. It is a program. You can see the map that seeks to do what Terry was saying. Sometimes what is the point of building a sidewalk to nowhere when nowhere else is improved? So instead, developers pay into a fund, and that fund goes to collect, pool the money, and then the city builds projects. Having said that, I talked. Here's what you need to be an eligible street, and then eventually, when we have enough money, we go ahead and do that. I talked to our folks managing the program. There are, if I go back, you can see the streets. Everything that you can see in dark, in orange, is an unimproved, or basically one of the three conditions that I mentioned. Unpaved, paved with no sidewalks, and so forth. Yeah. So, and those two, I guess. So in your area, we have identified, I think, the ones that you stated in your letter. I think most of them, I think all of them, but anyway, we get the point. I talked to the manager of that program. That LTIC program is way oversubscribed. When the program went to council, the rates were adjusted. So what gets paid, what gets into the fund, it's about $1 million a year. That was pre, recessions or pandemic. So at this point, the program is oversubscribed, and it will be a long time, 8-12 years before, we begin to pay back, because we have projects under construction. So that is a good program, but actually it's an underfunded program. So sorry to report on that. So of course, redevelopment will be a way to do this, but of course you need to have redevelopment. So what else I was able to look at, and by the way, I don't quite have the history of why things are, and I asked for it would take I don't know, enormous amount of time, go back to files that may not exist. So I think at this point I'll need to pass on that, but it's not uncommon, as I can show you in this map, to have some sort of an improved street. So what else? So basically, in a way, I thought, what would be how can we make a case to state that these are important needs? What would be the citywide city ask, right? Trying to kind of put a little bit of an advocate hat here. So did some analysis. So in terms of TSP, our transportation system plan, there are some streets that are either walkways, city walkways, or city bikeways. So that you see, for example, here you see Hasolo as a potential future bicycle connection. 60th is a collector, so in a way, because we don't have a lot of funding, we prioritize how we go about making improvements, and we try to maximize the money, stretch it to help the most. That means that a lot of local streets just don't have the chance of getting funded because we need to pull resources to streets of higher priority. But you can see here, there is a project. Then also, so this is basically how the street works, how the area works in terms of transportation. I was thinking, relative to, I guess, like pedestrian and bicycle, because we're talking about sidewalks and paths here. Then you can go to the transportation system plan projects. Again, I can provide these links. And there are two projects in the area. One is 60th Avenue Max Station area improvements. Basically says construct priority improvements, pedestrian and bicycle access to transit, as identified in the Growing Transit Communities Plan. Project number 5 million, which is very underfunded. It's in the inner part of Portland, and it's constrained, meaning that with some imagination, there's a way in which we can fund this. So we have two kinds of projects in the TSP, Transportation System Plan. Again, constrained and unconstrained. You want to be in the constraint. So this is better news, I guess. And in the 1 to 10 years, so you could make the argument that this is a kind of a priority for the city. And this has to be. I think this is in relation to the fact that this area is a station. It's near a station, right? Max station, in which we prioritize access, for growth management reasons. So if you go to the Bureau of Planning zoning, you see this reflected in the zoning of the area. So there's quite a demarcation between, I think, 57, normally the west side of the park, I guess, and to the east and south of Halsey, in which there is zone for more intense development, I think duplexes and such. But then you also have this industrial employment, I guess, warehouse type of activities that you see there today. So I guess that's how transportation and land use are talking to one another. We have an area of higher, we expect higher intensity, higher redevelopment, which I didn't see in my visit, but that could generate opportunities for redevelopment and for sidewalk infill over time. But notably, I don't see much change happening west of the park. So already talked about the LTIC, and then I found a couple of other. Oh yeah, so there's a Safe Routes to School project that kind of goes along the park, all the way to the school that Raymond mentioned, right? And it's quite a long project. Oh, actually, I forgot something. There's another project here. So we have the area station area improvements, and then we have a long project called the 60th Neighborhood Greenway that goes basically in this area. So here you have a greenway, right? And we talked about a bicycle improved connection, plus a project to go with it, transportation project in our TSP. And I found a Safe Routes to School plan. This plan went to council not too long ago, I think. So here's another project that says construct shared use path. I'm not exactly sure. I couldn't learn more details. So this is, so this area is not without some thinking, without some expectation of improvement and investment. But having said that, the city is we're not in good financial shape. One last thing is that, therefore, because we have limited funds, we have been trying to prioritize funding. And what a key criteria is, is this area, the area in question, an area of high need in terms, because it's an area of low income, area of high population of people of color or Latinx, in a combined index. So a combined index, actually, interestingly enough, does not show this area not to be high equity, not to get a high equity score. So that could actually work a little bit against advocating at the city for action here. So basically what I'm doing here is just trying to, I did a field visit, and then I just did a bit of a policy visit, if you will, to try to understand and put this area into context. I think it helps because you can use these tools, policy tools, in the citywide context to have a conversation that is more nuanced, but also to have make your case for why this area ought to be improved. So with that, that's basically what I found. There are no projects for this area in our budget, but as I said, there are some policy signals here in terms of projects that could be used. And then we have the your letter also addresses, so how do we go about it? How do the neighbors go about it? And we do have this local improvement district program that allows more localized action, working with the city. And here Andrew can provide some context of it. Maybe I'll pass it on to him. Yep, maybe I should
a
share.
couple of questions?
Yeah, okay, let's do that first. I'll do my best.
Whatever happened to PED PDX? And also, I don't think it's going to apply here, but the Halsey access to transit or the Halsey transit thing.
Yeah, good questions. The PED PDX, I did not have a project list, so I did not go there. It does have certain priorities, right? PED PDX is a plan for pedestrians, right? In case you don't know it. It would love to.
We had identified some of those at the coalition office.
Yeah, right. So PED PDX advises the TSP, so it's more aspirational than the transportation system plan. So I just went to the TSP to provide you more of a picture. But in terms of PED PDX, for example, is very good in terms of dealing with big streets like Halsey. If you want to provide more crossings, more safer crossings, you can rely on PED PDX, set a pretty good standard for crossings. So I did not go there. Maybe I'll find something, but I did not do that.
I just know that we had a mapping exercise with PED PDX. I remember doing that.
Yeah, I can tell you, the needs of this city are huge. We annexed the city for many decades, and the land that we grabbed and the residents have very poor street standards. So, and those have been the priority for many years since I've been at PBOT. So I don't want to run out of time, and I think we want to hear from Andrew, but I think there are some questions.
I had a question. I'm Sharon. Yeah. I was wondering if you had become aware of Hasselo Street. There is a fellow that lives on the northeast corner of Hasselo and 60th. I believe his name is Bob Richardson. Does that sound familiar? Mm-hmm. He has been videotaping crashes. There was apparently a serious accident on Hasselo. I believe there are tractor trailers that come along that residential street from the industrial area. So I just want to give you his name, and I or somebody else can reach out to him, and perhaps he could contact you. He's been waving this flag about Hasselo, and I'd like you to be aware of it.
Yeah, thank you. The best thing to do, I believe, is to just report it. A823 safe is the line that we have, and we collect. I as a planner, we use that information as we dive in, but also somebody cannot make any promise that would be there in 10 minutes, but eventually we should get to
it's actually been
written there.
A really issue as far as an issue for the Land Use and Transportation Committee since I got on the committee, which is in 2008. And so it has been a long-term documented issue. And we brought it up whenever they were looking at doing things with the transit center, transit area. And still with that, they decided, no, we don't need to do a sidewalk. It's the primary access for folks coming from the south side of the freeway to Normandale Park. It also is the bike route. It is also the major access for the industrial folks coming in and out of that back area. Mm-hmm. So it's a major issue for for us, and it has been for all these years, 13
And
years,
he has come to the city multiple times.
multiple
Okay.
times.
Thank you for
Bob
the context.
Richardson is his name, I believe.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Thank you, Sharon.
Yeah.
Susan?
Hi, Mauricio. I have one quick question for you. You mentioned an equity score. Could you just fill that out for me? I'm not familiar with that term.
Yeah, basically I'll go back to, I think I still have it. For example, I just applied this 2 weeks ago. My team applied for regional flexible fund grants, at Metro. There were 4 criteria: safety, is this say equity, growth management, in this case, dense justice support, density, main streets, economic development, and climate. So it's pretty common for us, when we have limited resources, how do we invest it? We have 99 neighborhoods, we have 700,000 people, right? So we use, we do listen to the public and we do plans. My team it's on the ground all the time talking to folks. But at some point when we need to apply and justify it to council, justify it to the funders is, hey, this is an area of equity need. And it's a combined of income, low income and high percentage of people of color. So if you have both of them, you're likely to pop. And in this case, in this map, if it's if it's darker purple and if it has a yellow outline, you're likely to get a better score. Therefore, it helps with grants and prioritization. So in this case, it seemed interesting that it's the opposite. It doesn't seem to be very high, relative to the areas next to you. So that's what it means.
Terry, here I got another question regarding your equity score.
Yeah.
Actually, it's a dual question. One, does the Ellington low-income apartments that are on 66, just barely outside of our neighborhood to the east, 66 between Halsey and Tillamook, does that figure into the equity score? Those are low income apartments owned by the city now. I think there's 244 units.
Yeah, it
and
should.
Secondly, how does the equity score of pedestrians balance with bicycles in that more people walk than ride bikes?
Good point. Yeah, it does. Tools have limited utility. So in this case, I think what it captures is census tracts. So basically, you do have areas of affordable housing but they are just outside of the census tract. So it just happens that in this area around the park, it doesn't score very high. It doesn't mean that there are no poor people, right, or people of color, because I saw them, just south of the park, for example. However, this is an average, right? It's an average, So it's just a piece of information. Doesn't mean that it's perfect and that everybody's the same. It's just...
Mauricio,
thank you.
I'd like to add on to that. At the park itself, it may not be it may be high income folks or higher income folks that live right there, but parks are meant to attract, just like transit centers are meant to attract.
Yeah.
So they draw from beyond that area to those places. So, when you're talking about transportation, you're looking at creating the corridors for those many populations going to those primary areas. So it's a tool, but it has to be used correctly.
Yeah. I didn't say that it was a pass, no pass. It is a tool. Yeah. Actually that help. I think you're reinforcing Terry's second point. Just because an area does not score high doesn't mean that it doesn't get a lot of traffic, right? That's the thing. We're dealing with people moving back and forth. So there are streets, Halsey, for example. I'm sure people of all types use it, right? Same with parks. So I understand your point. I was just providing some factual information that may help the case and understand the context relative to not your area, relative to our policies and what would make it a higher priority, but also relative to the city, because there are needs everywhere.
Michael,
Thank you very much.
Can I follow up with one question?
Mm-hmm.
The argument that we're making, Mauricio, is that these are hazardous These are the primary routes to the park and adjacent to the school. These aren't random, streets that have not been finished, scattered about these are the thoroughfares, as Tamara was just emphasizing. These are dangerous. So my understanding is that the city engineer already has the authority to compel any property owner to complete a street right of way adjacent to their properties. They just have to establish the need. And so one of the questions that we posed to you in the letter was, how does the city engineer establish that need? What is the criteria that we need to meet in order to complete the infrastructure?
Yes, that question I don't have for you.
But it was in the letter, Mauricio.
Yes, and I'm here to understand more what you mean, but also what I can tell. I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know that
You don't know how they determine whether there's a safety need to improve a street.
Yeah.
And this is your department?
I hope we're having a conversation here.
Yes, we are.
Okay. Yeah. So as I mentioned, we have miles and miles and miles of sidewalks of area, typically low-income people.
I'm not asking the city to pay for it. I'm saying if the city engineer determines that this is a safety need,
yes,
then the property owner pays for it.
Right.
The thing that puzzles me is that the city requires property owners to connect to a sewer as soon as it becomes available. They have to do that within 3 years. Why isn't there a similar requirement for property owners to complete their sidewalks? Why does the city inspect existing sidewalks to make sure that they're in good repair and yet ignores the fact that these streets have no sidewalk and streets that are in ill repair?
Yeah.
How does the city justify that, Mauricio?
These are questions that go back decades. And precedents have been set. If you were to suddenly the city engineer were to force for people to pay for the sidewalk, you're asking thousands of people of low income to suddenly fund sidewalks. It's not only a technical issue.
I'm not talking about the city, Mauricio. I'm talking about our neighborhood and the specific streets that we've identified.
Okay, Raymond, he just answered your question. He said
no, he has not.
No, he said the city would have to approach those property owners to pay.
Yeah, so why don't we?
And with the sewer, the city provides low financing arrangements for their connection to the sewer. Is the city willing to do something similar for completion of the sidewalks and infrastructure? Great. I don't see that it's currently policy.
Okay, great. That's what I wanted to talk about before we're out of time. There's a program, Local Improvement District, in which the city provides assistance for how folks can go about improving their neighborhoods. And Andrew here manages that program. I think we should give him some time to provide context, and we can continue the conversation. Andrew, are you there?
I am here.
I can barely hear you, Andrew. Can you speak up?
A little better.
Not really.
Somebody else is.
There you go.
That's good.
Okay, great. So why don't I'm going to get to what an LID is and how that works in a minute, but I thought it might be useful if I just gave you my own little contextual background, kind of looking at things from a little bit of a different lens. So your neighborhood was annexed to the city on June 4th, 1906, and that was by election. I've gotten quite a few calls about the streets around Normandale Park over the years. And what's quite unusual is typically these kinds of streets that I see, like the ones around Normandale Park, are in areas of the city that were more recently annexed to the city. So obviously with Rose City Park being in the city for 116 years. You've been in the city for a very long time. So, you know, my perspective, and I'm not a Rose City Park resident, but my perception here is that these streets that you have really stick out like a sore thumb just because they contrast so much with most of the other streets in your neighborhood. So I just want to briefly share some context and just to kind of nail down the terminology. We don't really refer to unimproved streets anymore because that was kind of confusing to people. So the terminology that we use is paved streets with curbs. So those are the streets that I almost never get any calls about because they're fully functional. And about 80% of the streets in the city are paved streets with curbs. And I'm going to show you a map in a minute. Those pop up in green. And again, I rarely get phone calls about those streets because they, generally speaking, work well for the people who live on them and travel on those streets. Rose City Park actually has quite a bit of a higher proportion of paved streets with curbs. 97% of the streets in Rose City Park are paved with curbs versus the citywide average of 80%. The streets that are problematic around Normandale Park are what we call paved streets without curbs. So you can think of those as center strip paving streets. So only about 3.6% of the streets in Rose City Park meet that criteria, but the citywide average is 17.3%. So Rose City Park, again, has a much lower infrastructure deficiency than the city as a whole. And I don't say that from the context of priority or anything else, because those statistics don't matter when you're thinking about a local improvement district. But I just thought that statistic would be useful. And then just two more quick ones I'll give you is we have 55.1 centerline miles of unpaved streets around the city, about 2.8% of the city's total, but you only have 1/10 of a centerline mile of unpaved streets in Rose City Park, which is 0.3% of your total. And wherever that street is, I think it'll pop up here on a map that I'll show you in a minute. That's not around Normandale Park. One thing that I've heard loud and clear over the years is the desire for sidewalks around Normandale Park. Our citywide average of sidewalk coverage is 63.0%. And again, Rose City Park has an average of 87.7%. So I'm going to switch over to a street surfaces map real quick before I tell you what an LID is and how that works. Can somebody enable me to share my screen? And you're going to have to forgive me because I'm not really good at technology. So
You should be good if you click at the bottom of the screen to share your screen.
okay, and where is that? Oh, there we go. Thank you. You'd think I'd have this down after 2 years of a pandemic. Okay, so this is the map. It's the 20 meg map. So, and by the way, I'd be happy to share a link to this map with Kelly after the meeting. And then if you want to somehow distribute it to everybody, you're welcome to do this. But this is something we call a Portland street surfaces by neighborhood map. It's a map that we update once a year. It's what we call an asset reporting map. And then I'll tell you what the street colors mean in a minute, but we actually have, just to correct one thing that was said earlier, we don't have 99 neighborhoods in the city. We actually have 94. And so what this map does is it just lists all of the neighborhoods in alphabetical order from 1 to 94. And Rose City is a little bit further along in the alphabet. So you're number 73 out of 94. So then if you just kind of scroll over here, this map is actually loading a little bit more quickly than I thought it would. Can everybody see where I'm kind of waving my cursor?
Yes.
So number 73 is Rose City Park. So there's Rose City Park amidst all the other neighborhoods. So I mentioned the paved streets with curbs. Those are all the green segments that you see on the map. And you can see they're predominantly in the closer in areas of the city. These yellow segments that you see are paved streets without curbs. And then you can see these little splotches of red streets here. Those are the unpaved streets. So now I'm going to zoom in a little bit further. here's Normandale Park right here. And you can see these yellow street segments here are the paved streets without curbs. You can see some more over here east of 60th Avenue. And then you can see this. This looks like it's the one unpaved street left in Rose City Park. So,
But you say they're paved, but they're all substandard width.
right. And I'm not talking about width. I'm just talking about what comprises.
Right,
the-
they're single lane with
Right.
potholed pavement.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So that segues well into what I'm going to share with you is that a lot of times people think of local improvement districts as the mechanism by which we pave unpaved streets. And when I started as a city, that's where, in fact, we put the lion's share of our efforts with paving unpaved streets. But over the years, that composition of projects that are funded by LIDs has shifted, where we actually now put a much higher proportion of our projects for LIDs on paved streets without curbs. So to your point, they may not be wide enough. The pavement condition may be in really bad shape. They don't have curbs, they don't have drainage, they don't have sidewalks. And so increasingly what people are doing is they're voting with their feet, they're voting with their dollars, and they're saying, we want to spend the money to reconstruct our street. Give you an example. Today I got a petition from a property owner in Southwest Portland, and they sent me a petition asking to spend $50,000 to reconstruct their street and build a sidewalk. That wasn't $50,000 for the whole project. That was $50,000 per property owner. So LIDs are not a prioritization exercise. LIDs are a tool that we offer to everybody in the city. And if there are property owners who want to fund that work, then we will do an LID with council approval to build whatever it is people want us to build. Think of it as a first come, first serve. We don't apply equity scores. We don't go through a prioritization exercise. It's just really simple. If people want to fund an LID, then I'm here to work with people who want to fund the LID. The challenge around Normandale Park is that Parks is a major landowner. And so if we were to look at a local improvement district around Normandale Park, Portland Parks and Recreation would pick up a very high proportion of that cost. I have done a number of local improvement districts with parks over the years where they, and those have been, by the way, very successful partnership between PBOT and Portland Parks and Recreation. The common theme to all of those was that parks stepped up to do an LID when they were already budgeting capital dollars to build a new park or substantially renovate an existing park. And keep in mind that when park goes through that exercise of building a park, they go through the same land use requirement that, say, a developer who wanted to do infill development or build a new house would be required to do. So I would see the most likely scenario of, and I don't speak for parks, but I would see the most likely scenario of something triggering an LID if parks were to come in and do a significant change of use to Normandale Park. I am not a park planner and I'm not a parks expert, so I couldn't begin to speculate whether that would ever happen or when it would happen. I'm just simply trying to lay out the most likely scenario that would then trigger, from an LID perspective, improvement to the streets around Normandale Park. So I'll pause it there and maybe just be available to answer some questions. I could share a lot more information, but I know I've shared quite a bit already, so I don't want to do all the talking. Go ahead.
I got a question, Terry here. In the Cully neighborhood on 60th Avenue, they have put in sort of an asphalt type sidewalk on one side of the street, which is kind of probably a half cost measure or something like that. Has that ever been considered for some of the other areas of the city, like some of the streets in our neighborhood? You know what I'm referring to? It's 60th Avenue between Cully and Portland Highway, between Cully Boulevard and Portland Highway.
Yeah, I am familiar with that project. I did a LID actually literally 1 block away from there. So I am familiar with the project to which you're referring. So one thing to keep in mind about two things to keep in mind about local improvement districts is I'm very heavily involved in the scoping of LIDs. So when property owners approach me, I have conversations with them about what is the problem that you're trying to solve. Do you need more on-street parking? Do you need a sidewalk? Do you want to solve a drainage problem? So we do not have a one-size-fits-all scoping of LIDs. So let's just give you a hypothetical scenario. Parks Bureau comes up with a master plan for Normandale Park. They're going to do a substantial renovation, and I'm just making this up, 5 years. I would be sitting down with the Parks Bureau and the other property owners around the park, as well as the Rose City Neighborhood Association, to figure out what it is people want in their street. Do they want lots of parking? Maybe they want a narrower street. Like just yesterday, council approved the initiation of a new LID in the Centennial neighborhood. We're building a new park called Park Lane Park. And there we actually have a street that we're going to narrow, and we're going to move the curb because the street doesn't need to be as wide as it is, and people don't want to have to cross a 40-foot wide street with their young children when people are drag racing up and down the street. They would rather have a calmer street with speed bumps that's narrower for them to cross. So there's an example of where I worked with the Parks Bureau and the community to figure out what the problem was they were trying to solve, and then the LID tailored the scope of the project to meet what those needs are. So the other thing is the biggest cost driver on LIDs is not how wide we build a street. The biggest cost driver on an LID is what is the denominator in terms of number of properties that are sharing in the cost. And so if you're looking at your particular park and you've got a bunch of people with like 100-foot wide frontages, which by the way is the width of half of a downtown Portland City block, that's the biggest cost driver on an LID, is how wide or narrow the frontages are. So if anybody's been to Amsterdam, Holland, you've seen those very narrow houses that they built along the canals. The reason those houses were built narrow and tall is because in Holland, the property taxes were based on the width of your house. So if you built a narrow house that was tall, your property taxes were lower than if you had a wider lot. And so typically where we find the biggest concentrations of unpaved streets, for example, are in like low density areas, for example, Southwest Portland, where you have really wide lots. And obviously Rose City Park is very different than Southwest Portland, but again, I'm just giving that analogy that that's usually the biggest cost driver of an LID, is how many benefiting properties can share in the cost of the street improvements. And I would just also quickly add, the biggest proportion of the cost is reconstructing the pavement. When you build what we call a 3-on-8 section, which is 3 inches of asphaltic concrete, otherwise known as blacktop, on 8 inches of aggregate base, otherwise known as rock, that's where the lion's share of your cost is before you start adding the curb and the sidewalk.
Andrew, and I apologize if you covered this and I missed it. I had a child getting ready for. Can you talk a little bit about the financing mechanism and how that works? I'm imagining if you have a $500,000 project split 10 ways, not a bunch of families are going to have $50,000 sitting in the bank ready to just plop down. And so could you just talk about like, what is the standard way of approaching that? How do these neighbors actually come up with the cash?
Yeah, so one of the reasons, there's 2 primary reasons why, there's 2 big business reasons why people pursue LIDs when they do. One is it tends to really expedite development. So I gave you that example of a new LID we're forming in the Centennial neighborhood in Southeast Portland. A key reason why Parks is pursuing that is there's special dispensations under city code for local improvement districts, so people can receive a building permit before the improvements are actually permitted, because the city now is in charge of the project. The second reason is people pursue LIDs because they don't have to come up the cash up front. They can just wait to get billed until the LID is actually built. and then they can finance it over 5, 10, or 20 years.
Through what mechanism? Through a local credit union, through the city? Like how does that actually work?
Well, the city has a line of credit. And so as we're designing and building an LID, we tap into that line of credit. And then once the improvements are done, then we take a final assessment ordinance to city council and then apportion the cost to the benefiting properties. And then that line of credit then eventually gets replaced by something we call the bond sale, where we bundle all the LID debt, the SPC debt, and the sidewalk repair lien debt. And we sell that municipal debt on Wall Street, and then we just pass through the rate that we get charged on the debt with a slight premium for default risk. So we just did a bond sale, and the interim interest rate is 5.20%. And the bond sale that we did, the 20-year rate then dropped to 2.91%.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, an example here is if the folks on Haslow wanted to do an LID, they could, and it gets approved, everyone's on board, we're moving forward. The city would manage the project, the city would figure out the financing, they would sell the bond, and basically send a bill that said, here's your payments for the foreseeable number of years in order to pay for it. And that would go to each of the landowners. And I'm assuming that would be some sort of a lien against the property. It'd
be a lien against the property. Yeah.
If the property is then sold, someone's buying the house and they know they've got this additional payment moving forward. Is that just like very basic nuts and bolts of how something like this would work as a group of neighbors?
You summarized it really well. I would just emphasize that it's each property owner's individual decision whether to pay in full or finance over 5, 10, or 20 years. So I really like how you summarized that. I think if we were to make it an even simpler explanation, where LIDs basically result in the city being both the engineer and the banker for the project. So, I think what was attractive, I don't know whether this LID that I'm petitioning on Southwest Portland will move forward or not. I've only got one petition. I mean, the petitions went in the mail yesterday. I only have one back out of 17, and I need 9 in order to move it forward to city council. But I think what was attractive to the woman who signed the LID petition is all she had to do literally was sign her name on the dotted line and then scan the petition and send it to me. She doesn't have to hire an engineer to design it. She doesn't have to go to her bank or pass the hat with her neighbors to try to figure out how to raise the money. She can go on with her life and go to work every day and take care of her family and focus on that. And basically she's just throwing the project over the fence for me and the city to manage.
And is there a percentage that the city requires of the impacted landowners for it to move forward?
Yeah, in most cases, an LID moves forward with petition support in excess of 50%.
Okay.
And again, just piggybacking on what I said earlier, let me share this other screen if I may. Hope I don't mess this up. Okay. Again, you'd think I'd have this down after all these years. But now I'm switching to my GIS layer. So can everybody see Normandale Park there?
Yep.
So there's Normandale Park, there's Haslow Street. It's actually inventory to the paved street with curb because it has a curb on one side, but that can be a little bit misleading. So anyway, there's Normandale Park. You can just see by the sheer dent of how big this tax lot is, and it's got 57th on the east, Haslow on the south, 55th on the west. I mean, if this park ever comes in for development, it's going to be hit up for a lot of frontage improvement. And you can also just see that because this is such a large percentage of the land area in this area, parks would be a very large part of any LID that was proposed.
Can I ask another question here really quick? And it's hopefully it's a simple answer. Take Haslow Street, and there's a couple of blocks there that don't have sidewalks, but the rest of it has sidewalks. Would the property owners that actually have sidewalks that connect to the part that doesn't have sidewalks, would they also be paying in the LID?
In very few cases do we ever charge a property owner that has an existing curb. Let me back up. If you have an existing curb, but you don't have a sidewalk, then that property would be charged. If you, in most cases though, we don't usually do an LID for people who have existing curb. In that instance, we only assess the property if it doesn't have a sidewalk and we're actually building the sidewalk.
You know, most people don't want to make a purchase unless they know what they're getting into, right? So is there a mechanism? So let's say the neighbors all along Tillamook say, yep, we want to have curbs, we want sidewalks here, and we just want to know what we're talking about in terms of a price tag. Can you talk us about the mechanism of how the city can come out, do a survey or take a look and then say, this is what it's going to be per property owner? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, I can do that. Can you give me a cross street with Tillamook?
Ray, you want to name those? Is it
57th to 62nd. It actually not only needs from 58th to 62nd.
All right. There's Tillamook. So you can see this. You can see this yellow line here. So that's the paved street without curb on Tillamook between 56th and 57th. And this is a really good example of why the street has never been improved. So take a look at this. I'm going to zoom in here. I know I'm not quite answering your question, but I think this is an important example. So right here, you can see this is what we call the classic side yard problem. So I'm measuring that out. That is 130 feet of frontage here. So somebody's got a side yard here with 130 feet of frontage on Tillamook Street, plus you have an alley here, and then there's another 100 or so feet here. So a downtown Portland city block is 200 feet. So, you know, you add all this up, you've got more than a downtown Portland city block, and all the properties are orienting toward the numbered streets, 56 and 57th. And so that's why the developers didn't pave Tillamook Street when they originally built this neighborhood, because they put their resources into building 57th and 56th to the exclusion of Tillamook Street. So really it was the economic equation for the developers. We're going to orient all our houses on one street. We're going to properly improve that street, and then the other street, we'll just let it go and not build it standards. I know, you know, Mauricio gave you some of the background on that. I couldn't tell you whether you're talking Normandale Park or Tillamook Street. I can't give you the lowdown on why that particular street turned out the way it is. I can just tell you that the whole reason my job was created is to clean up all these messes. You know.
Bless your heart.
But we're talking east of 57th, not west.
All right, well, let's slide over there. By the way, fun little fact while I'm sliding my GIS over, the very first LID in Portland paved what was then known as B Street, which today we know as West Burnside Street. So had we not done an LID for West Burnside Street, I think it was like 6 years after the city was incorporated, you'd be driving on a gravel street on West Burnside Street.
And those alleys that you showed, I don't think they're there anymore. I think they've been consumed by the yards. There's very few alleys left in Rose City Park.
It could be that they're platted rights of way. There's nothing really there, but
Right.
here is Tillamook Street between 59th and 60th. I'm seeing these yellow lines. That's part of the 18% of the streets in the city where people aren't happy with them. Same scenario. You can see this classic side yard problem of 100 feet of frontage. Remember what I said at the outset of my presentation, the biggest cost driver in terms of how much an LID cost is what you're dividing by. So just give you an example. Here's Tillamook between 60th and 61st. So if I measure this out, that is 200 feet. So that's the equivalent of a downtown Portland city block. Here are two properties that's only 100 feet. Okay, so hypothetically speaking, if 61st were an unpaved street today, and somebody said, "Hey, I want to go ahead and improve this 100 feet as opposed to this 200 feet," we've got two properties here on 61st. You got two properties here on Tillamook. All other things being equal, the bill for Tillamook is going to be twice as high because you've got.
We can do the math, Andrew. I understand that, but currently, if a developer is proposing a subdivision, he's required to fully complete the streets. He can't avoid paying for the side streets just because he's paying for the front street. Isn't that true?
That's true now, but it wasn't true at the time that these houses were built. So,
Are you sure?
well, yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the map here and I can see.
Well,
the street.
I know that they're not done, but I don't know why they weren't done. I know that it was certainly an economic consideration, but my concern is why the city permitted them to do it.
Yeah, and let's just pick this one property at random. So this particular property was built in 1932. I wasn't alive in 1932, so I couldn't tell you why in 1932 they were allowed to do that.
So I appreciate the idea that the denominator makes a big difference in the cost, but the numerator really matters too. So how do we find out what the numerator is?
Generally what I do, and I apologize if I didn't fully answer your question. So you can imagine I talk to hundreds of people in the course of a year who call and inquire about improving their street. So what I typically do is provide examples of what a particular street, what a recently completed LID cost per foot. And I tell people, you know, for example, I haven't had an engineer go out look at Tillamook Street and tell me, well, this is exactly how much it would cost to improve Tillamook, but I can usually use some recently completed LIDs as examples and just give not what I call cost estimates, but cost examples. There's a big difference between a cost example and a cost estimate. A cost example is not a representation, for example, that Tillamook is going to cost this amount of money. It is just saying, hey, we just recently paved the street in North Portland. This is what the cost was per foot. If you applied that number over here, then using that example, this is what it costs. And then typically what we can do, and I won't walk you through all the math again, in my defense, I've talked to a lot of mathematically challenged people over the years, so I just felt like I should kind of walk people through it. Typically what I do is say, okay, we know how long Tillamook Street is. Using this example, it would cost this amount of money, and now we're going to divide by 4 because there are 4 properties. So then you can, you know, we can kind of land on some examples of this might be $80,000 per house or whatever the number is, and then I can give them a financing example of what that monthly cost would be over 20 years. And people say, you know, I think you're in a ballpark where we would support it. Go have an engineer prepare an estimate and then send me an LID petition. So that's an example of what happened on my LID in Southwest Portland. I knew how long the street was. I gave them some cost examples. They said, yeah, we're interested. Then I had a real cost estimate developed. Took that estimate, divided it by the number of properties, sent everybody their own individual LID petition. The average was about $50,000 per household. Now I'm just waiting to see whether people sign and return the petitions.
So Tamara,
Yes.
we're about double the time that we had allocated for this. So I guess I would suggest at this time that we thank Mauricio and Andrew, and we have a follow-up discussion at our next month's committee meeting to see what our next steps might be.
That sounds great. I like that.
Well, thank you for having me. This is
Before you go, let's make sure that Michael has a chance to say something. Michael, you sat through all of this and you're representing Rose City Park Elementary.
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to say Piedmont really responded incredibly well to our big safety concern right near the school. That's the crossing between across 57th at Thompson. They promised me 2 months, and within a month I had a crosswalk that greatly improved the safety of accessing the school for our students and our families. So I do know that Peabody, at least, and in that case, was very highly responsive. So I'm greatly appreciative of that. I do appreciate Ray inviting me to be here this evening. I've learned a lot. I would focus on from my particular perspective, I'm focused on the safe schools or safe routes to schools. So obviously any way to improve that is greatly appreciated. I try to always think about, like, are there other ways to improve the safety just beyond the, the sidewalks and the roads and so forth? Are there other ways to think about that? So I look forward to the further conversations. And obviously, again, I'm appreciative of Ray and the passion and the interest in trying to do that. And I also appreciate our friends from PBOT and coming and really sharing a detailed understanding. I've learned a lot tonight about how these things work. So, and I'm new to the school. So I came in late September, and someone was mentioning about the Ellington. Obviously, we have kids that don't live directly on the areas that we were talking about tonight, but our kids do access those. And certainly from an equity lens, our Ellington kids are a huge part of our community and accessing the school safely. And how do we do that? I would like to see more kids walking and getting that actual exercise, and reducing the number of cars that come to our school would really be great. So I know that also means we have to have safe, routes in terms of pedestrians, bicyclists, etc. So anyways, I know it's a long endeavor, and I really appreciate the education tonight, quite honestly. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us.
You bet.
And thank you so much, Mauricio, and where's your name? Andrew, I'm sorry, Andrew, for joining us tonight. A lot of good information.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll follow up with the links I provided. I also include the website to the LID program that Andrew runs. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Okay, if we're going back to the agenda, we're at a point where we need to go back to the minutes from February 22nd.
Real quick, Tamara,
Yes.
if I'm understanding you correctly, I mean, there's a lot to debrief from that conversation, that presentation. Are you saying we're going to do that next month's meeting?
For the sake of time, we have 45 minutes left.
Yeah.
So I think probably unpack the examples that they gave us.
Sure.
In our own time, and bring our thoughts back to the next meeting.
Perfect. Just curious. Okay, thank you.
No, very good. Thank you. Thank you for circling the wagons. Okay, Kelly, do you happen to have the minutes available?
I do have them printed out.
Okay.
So anybody have any suggested corrections or additions to the minutes?
I thought they were good. Sharon?
Sorry, I believe Susan had a correction to the minutes. I believe Ben had a correction to the minutes. I don't know if anyone else has had an opportunity to review them.
I have not reviewed them.
I do. I do have a correction. So if you'd like me to start, I'm happy to do that. It is on item 8F. And I know how difficult it is to take minutes. So I'm not being critical of whoever the note taker was. But it says Susan asked if all the feedback from neighbors will be compiled. That was not the question that I asked. The question that I asked was, I asked Tamara if all of the feedback from neighbors was shared with the Land Use and Transportation Committee members, because the feedback wasn't just intended for Tamara, but it was for everybody on the committee. And Tamara responded pretty much as it says here, but she really didn't answer my question. So it's just the first part of that needs to be corrected.
Okay, got it.
Thank you. And then the other thing that I brought up at that meeting had to do with, well, something that I learned a little bit about tonight. It was a very interesting conversation about equity. I brought up the issue about spending money on an eyesore on our safe street in what I have learned now officially is a low equity neighborhood. as opposed to investing those funds in outer southeast Portland crash corridors. 20 of the 30 high crash corridor sites in Portland are in southeast versus 8 in northeast and none in Rose City Park.
My comment was 8E. And if we want to amend that when we're ready to amend that.
Go ahead.
I'm all for slowing traffic. I completely do not support bollards at 62nd.
Okay. I move that we accept the minutes with those corrections as said by Ben and Susan.
Thank you, Kelly.
A second.
Terry hasn't reviewed them yet. Should we wait?
Nope. If
I'll
Terry,
just abstain from
if he has
voting.
a follow-up comment on the minutes, I could incorporate that at a later date.
Okay.
I believe that these minutes were shared with the board prior to the board meeting. So I'm assuming that they will get the updated, corrected minutes.
Well, maybe I did read them for the board, but I'm not putting 2 and 2 together right now.
It should.
Is that correct that they will get the updated minutes?
Yes, they will.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay. I move that we accept these minutes as updated. Do I have a second?
I second.
Michelle, you had said something? No. Okay. Okay. Motion
I seconded.
seconded. All those in favor say aye.
I
All those opposed, same sign. Okay, minutes have been passed, and those will be added to the new information for the board.
Okay, and then printer. Did you say print or email?
email would be great.
Okay, 51569.
I'm not sure who Michelle is. Can you mute her, Kelly?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, next item we have is Slow Streets and the latest information. And Terry had something to add.
You want me to add that now or just, it'll just take a couple, 3 minutes. Monday morning, I was pulling out of my driveway and I heard a crash. It was on the hill between 66th and 67th on Sandy. I mean, on Halsey. A single pickup had hit a power pole and was upside down in the middle of the street. And there were a couple people pulling the driver out by the time I got there. I mean, I was only, less than a minute away. And as soon as the driver got out, he jumped on a bicycle and rode away. I assume the truck was stolen. However, the reason I bring this up is because we had a single car or a single vehicle hit a power pole that's on the sidewalk. And now we're wanting to put big concrete barriers in the middle of the street that are far more dangerous of somebody running into than a power pole on the sidewalk. And that's the reason I brought it up.
Noted. Thank you, Terry. Right now, we have a batch of information that has been submitted to us for additional testimony for the board. And included in that is a petition that is in favor of putting the bollards at 62nd. So we've got all that information. I'm piling into the online cache for the April 5th meeting. So when you see it pop in there, that's going to be, your chance to look it over, make sure that I've got everything.
Camera?
Yes.
Question. on the people that have submitted testimony,
Yeah,
or if they're on a petition or whatever, I mean, there may be a petition for the opposite, but
right.
do they have not necessarily an address, but at least where these people live within the neighborhood? Do you live on 62nd and Hancock, or do you live on Sacramento and 64th, or wherever? Because I want to know what the people
Okay, you're
say
fading
on
out.
64th versus maybe what the people on Sacramento versus what the people say south of the park. They're saying, hey, we want you to do this on the other side of our park. So I think it's real important to hear the people that are immediately impacted versus the people that say, hey, I want this, that don't live right there in front of what's going to happen. Or what
Gary, I think that's a really good point, because I think we have to think holistically about the whole neighborhood. I'll give you an example. If they put the bollard up, it's better for my house, but I don't think it's better for my neighbors. I think that there's other ways to try and slow the traffic, and I think it impacts the people who live right there negatively. And another example, 72nd, when we close 72nd coming north, 1,200 cars a day are going to filter out around the golf course. Maybe some of them won't, but there's going to be at least 900 that are going to filter off and impact people's neighborhoods and lives. And those of us that live on the north side should respect and be thoughtful of those on the south side of the golf course. And I would hope those on the south side were also respectful of those of us that live on the north side. We really need to think of it holistically, not just what's in my backyard. I think it's really important because it makes the whole thing better
very
versus just my block.
Very eloquently said, Ben. I appreciate that.
Okay.
I agree, Ben. Bringing up the issue of 72nd, if 72nd is going to be made into a one-way street, is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and it's going to make it'll be great for us.
What would be, I assume it will have to be a couplet. So what would be the street that would be going the other way?
So 72nd, the plan now is 72nd continues south. And the bike path pedestrian way goes on what is now the northbound. So we would have less traffic up on Sacramento. That'd be great. I'm walking my dog, I got less cars. But it will ruin the neighborhood to the south. 1,200 cars a day.
And so what would happen is the northbound traffic would have to find any other route. And basically the next route over would be Snake Hill, which is 62nd.
Yep.
To come up. So
61st, 61st. Or 60.
Go drive 60th at 5 o'clock with the traffic from Barrow.
You're right.
Yeah, both of those streets. It'll be horrible. It'll be horrible for those neighbors.
Okay, but we're getting off topic here, and we've got 30 minutes. So
I have a question about this issue. You mentioned a petition. I would think that petitions and other information that came in, since it's on our agenda for tonight, that we would have seen this information before the meeting.
It is not at this level at this point. It is beyond the Land Use and Transportation Committee review. It is.
No, I know, but it's on our agenda to discuss. So you would think that you would have that. I also am of the understanding there was a meeting today that you met at the intersection, you and perhaps Kelly and perhaps Zach. And is that correct?
Yes, we met out there and walked the site and measured things because we wanted to make sure we understood the where the bollards would be. And I took photographs of it. So that information is going to be at the meeting on the 5th as well.
So you're a subcommittee now of this committee?
No, it's just fact finding.
Is it something that perhaps other committee members might have been interested in and perhaps have been invited to this meeting that you
I
had?
don't think so. It was basically a select group of us asking each other, you want to go up there and check this out? You can do the same thing with any of your
well, I'm just saying we are a committee, and so I would think that you would have that information out there, and if other people wanted to join, like for going down to the apartment building at 47th, and there's other things that you just put out there, this is going to happen. And
Yeah,
so
that could happen, but you know, I there's nothing stopping you from grabbing anyone else and walking around the neighborhood and looking at things. It's a free country. So,
no, I know, but I'm just saying that we are a committee.
Committee, if it was a, you know, if we had a quorum, then that would be a problem, but we did not have a quorum. And so we just went ahead and walked the site and took measurements and discussed what was coming up and trying to figure out how can we make this a win-win. And that
Okay,
was the point.
I just want to clarify my position. I'm not saying it was a committee meeting. I'm saying right now we are a committee.
Right.
Right now we're having a committee meeting, and that as a group and as a committee, I would think that other members would have been notified and offered and invited and been given a heads up that something was going to happen should they care to join. So that's what I'm saying.
Okay, I appreciate that.
And I would
I
like to
understand.
see whatever the information that you have gathered at some point.
Yeah, I'm actually getting an email tacked together from that information that I'm going to send to Scott Cohen to see if I can get some more information back from him. And basically it's asking, can we separate the sign and the bollard? You know, can we put the sign at the side of the roadway instead of in the bollard? We also identified that there's 3 bollards that are being proposed, or those round things at 64th instead of just 2. And I thought there were just 2. And so I took a photograph of those and also how that impacts the view corridor. And so identifying where that is, how that impacts the view corridor, and how that would be perceived from that throat point at 64th at Sacramento. So I took a panoramic photograph of that site. Also looking at the crosswalks, trying to figure out, is there a way in which we could have an elevated crosswalk? And that may take, instead of having a batch of bollards there, in addition to a painted crosswalk. So we're looking at ways in which we can have a win-win of just slowing the traffic down. So if you have an opposition to that, then good on you. But I just wanted to let you know where we are on that.
I
And
wasn't saying that I had an opposition to anything that in particular that you were saying. I was just clarifying that we are a committee, we're in a committee meeting, that perhaps other committee members would have been interested in this same subject, and it would have been nice to have had a heads up and an invitation to come.
I understand. It was spur of the moment. I'm trying to gather as much information as I can from, I've got a lot of petition or information from the no's, and I don't have all the information I wanted from the yeses. And so I wanted to get better information about what the issues were for the pedestrians and the bicyclists, and how that would make it safer if we had the bollard there. So
Where did the petition, where did it generate from?
I haven't gone through that information as yet.
I can answer that. It's a couple things. One is, Sharon, if you want to walk up there, I'd love to meet you up there. It'd be nice to meet in person. I think it'd make all of this a lot easier. So if you're interested, let me know. The second one is a number of folks who testified. I mean, it's been a number of months now at these different meetings, spoke, and we decided that would be helpful. And so I started it, and then we spread it around neighbors. I don't know everyone who signed it, so you may recognize names or may not when it's posted, but that's where it came from. That was the genesis.
Tamara, could you speak to the raised crosswalk idea? Could you describe that?
I think they have one at the airport. So if you've been through the airport drive-through, it's actually like a 3-inch lip and go up, and then it's flat for a while, and then it goes down.
About the
So
height of a
instead of-
speed bump.
Yeah, it's a long,
like a speed bump.
it's a long speed bump.
Only it's flat on top.
Got it. That sounds like something that would certainly be better than a bollard.
I think it would function just perfectly for that site.
And remember, Peabody didn't want to put
I
anything there.
I
They didn't
question
anything
the
at that
petition.
intersection. Their plan included nothing at that intersection. Their engineers had nothing at that intersection.
True.
It wasn't until we asked, and then they came back and we saw the impact.
Yeah.
And so their plan, which was to slow traffic and make it safe for young families and for those of us who have kids that are grown that walk our dogs, and all of us, their plan included nothing at that intersection. It wasn't until I brought up this idea, which I wish I could take back, that it came up, because we didn't have the impact.
True.
And so I like the idea that I floated, and I don't know if it's been that we look at this in phases. We've already had one phase, which was we did the crosswalk at 64th. That helps young families. Now, my family never had a problem. I raised my kids all the way through. They went to the local schools. We never had a problem. But we have a crosswalk because young families want that, and I support that. There's going to be bollards at 64th. They're going to be ugly. I support that. There's bollards at 72nd. They're ugly. I support that. But why don't we do that? And then we have a crosswalk or whatever we put at the top of the stairs, and then stop and measure the data. Scott Cohen does agile type development. Do something, measure it, do something, measure it, and then adjust your input. We don't have to put the bollards in. We could do the sidewalk. We could do 64th with the bollards. Does the traffic slow down? Are we successful? Have we put in the right signage? And then if it hasn't, let's go back and revisit it. But if it slowed the traffic down, why do we need to do it? It wasn't part of the plan. It was never presented by Peabody.
And it's only a block it's only really a block on Sacramento from 64th.
Yeah. I think there's other issues that get developed by doing it. Turning to the east. Anyway.
Well, I will be publishing all that stuff, and anything that comes in from Scott Cohen, I've been putting up on the website.
Thank you.
And all the questions that I raised to him goes up on the website.
And
so I'm trying real hard to be as transparent as possible and ask him these critical questions. He did say
that. Thank you for all of your effort. I really do appreciate it. And I do think that, again, we need to find the solution that helps the young families. It helps those of us that are empty nest, and it helps those of us who are retired or wherever we are in life. We need to look at the whole thing. It's not something about one segment of our neighborhood. We need to have these holistic solutions.
I know. And let me tell you, it was so quiet up there. Hardly a single car went by when we were up there for a good 20 minutes. And it's like, what is this about? Why are we doing all this for what? You know?
Tamara.
Tamara.
You know, I'm just the monkey in the middle trying to get through this process. Yes.
Thank you.
Tamara, I just wonder if the petition is an attempt to stack the deck.
And you know what? It's always quiet there. I work in the yard at my house all the time.
Do you?
All the time. I work in my neighbor's yards all the time. It's quiet. It's not a problem there. I agree with Ben. I agree that starting with a crosswalk is a wonderful idea. If we change it to a raised crosswalk, I think that would also be a good idea. There are already safety measures along Sacramento where there are speed bumps already. There is a reduced speed. There are the situation down on 64th. And now with what I understand is going to be a one-way street, it's going to be a lot different. Let's start with something simple and see how it changes it, and if it changes, and that we don't need
I really encourage you to be at our meeting on the 5th of April, because at that point, the testimony, you can actually, the testimony's already been closed, but I agree with you. You know, I mean, I've said what I said, you know, and what I'm going to do is I'm trying just to get as many facts as we can out there, and what are the options. And basically, when I asked Scott Cohen about the phasing option, he said, really, the first phase is putting speed bumps. That's the only thing that really slows people down. And then it was obvious that when we were sitting there, the few cars that did go by, it didn't phase them at all. They just went flying by and they didn't slow down. So there's a little bit of reality in all of this, because it looks like a straightaway for speeders too, but there's not that much traffic. So I don't know. I'm just the monkey in the middle trying to pull all this stuff together and find something that's a win-win.
Right.
And so I'm just putting it up there.
I think that's what we're looking for too, Tamara.
Yeah.
Boy, wouldn't it be great the way Andrew and Mauricio were talking, if we could take that wide street, because it's very wide, narrow it, put a multi-use path along the top of the golf course. Man, that stuff, I start thinking there's like a master plan where we could do something really wonderful in our neighborhood that solved all those problems.
Yeah, but I think if we could just put it all on the asphalt, and move away from there being such space,
Yeah.
that would help.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, we're down to 20 minutes. That's the more to go. If we can go on, we've talked about the bollards. They're at 62nd. Ben, you've been talking with Scott about changing the intersection at Brazzy and 62nd.
4th.
64th.
64th, sorry.
64th, yeah. So
Sorry.
so
Haven't eaten
you
dinner.
know, so Scott had given us the option of doing something more permanent, and he threw out a financial number that was $250,000. And I think we probably need to engage somebody to do some graphic design so that we have a picture of what it could look like, because it's hard to think of what it could look like beyond when it was empty. And now we have this horrible looking painted thing with these batons. And if we could come up with some designs and then float them around the neighborhood to see if people are interested in doing fundraising, because I would like to have something permanent there. Extend the curbs out, narrow the street. I mean, I sat there and I thought, what if we had benches sitting there where you could look at the mountain? It's so wonderful this time of year when people are looking at the mountain. You could have benches there. You could still have your crosswalk.
Mhm.
It would enhance the neighborhood, not take away from the neighborhood.
I like that idea.
I do too.
Anyone know any graphic designers? Because I agree, having a visual makes the dream a lot easier.
It really does. And I think that, one of the neighbors who's not on the call tonight, Judy and I were talking about somebody. I can probably figure that out and call some favors in for some friends to come up with something to start the creative process of what that might look like. To get people, what I've done is I floated a lot of photos from Google Maps, and I went down to 41st and Wisteria and took photos, pre and post, what it looks like. And I don't think it does a lot of justice.
I thought that was very effective though.
But I think we could do something like that for up here to make it more permanent. And, you think about all the people that do work on the hill, that would be nothing for us to maintain and have that look nice and have whether a sitting area or just a garden area, and not look at those god awful batons and yellow paint.
Okay.
Anyway,
I
think it's
that's a nice pitch.
Well, I think it's important to, I've been at times probably more aggressive with Scott Cohen than I should have, just out of frustration. And I felt Mauricio and Andrew maybe got a little bit of heat tonight that made it a little too personal. I think we have to be mindful that these are city employees doing their job. They didn't make the policies. I think Kelly, you were saying in the what is it, like, let's talk about the topic, not the person. And it felt like it was getting a little personal tonight. We need to make sure that when we do these things, it doesn't get personal.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Ben. Let's see. Latest dialogue with Scott Cohen. I think I covered that. And that was, on that whole stretch there, and the Bruzzy redesign. So we're down to the updates, the intersections of their sightline. If
Conflict of interest statements
right
up above at the top
I missed that.
under new business.
Yes, I did. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was on the other page. Sorry. Yeah, conflict of interest statements. And I think we're missing only one from Zachary. So we've got all the other ones.
Just on that, I apologize. I actually went back and found your email. It was sent like within a day of the birth of my second child. So
Okay.
it was a lower priority. I got it in today to Dawn. I'm assuming that's who I sent it to. It's supposed to send it to.
Yes.
Great. Yeah, so it's in now.
Okay. But we've got the signature. I mean, we've got conflict of interest forms signed for all of the board members as well as all of the land use and transportation folks. And I know that I talked to Allison yesterday, and so she's getting those together to send to you, Sharon.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, so small business district in Rose City Park.
So I stole that out of an email that you sent me, Tamara.
Oh, okay.
Which I thought maybe that was an outgrowth of the TIF discussion.
Yes.
It doesn't need to be there.
Okay, well, it is an interest of mine because I want to make sure that our businesses along the stretch that isn't in Hollywood, which is kind of arbitrarily somewhere around the 51st hotel apartments. And then from that point going eastward is not in Hollywood. And so that used to be called the International District. And we've seen the prices of both rental for single family and multifamily go up. Now, the commercial is even worse. So a lot of those smaller shops are having trouble. The question is, is there an idea of us doing a TIF that would help our businesses stay and be able to thrive in our area? So it's just it's a tool, what can we use, to help our neighborhood thrive and be more stabilized.
Deborah,
For businesses. Yeah.
it might, I don't know, this is just off the top of my head, but when the church property develops, there might, a TIF is the money from what the property was, the difference between what the property was and what the property will be once it's redeveloped.
Right.
And that might be a good place to look for funding for a TIF when some sort of an apartment building or housing, or chances are it's going to be housing, goes in. I don't know how soon that's going to be, but obviously it's going to improve the value of the property immensely, or improve the tax structure immensely. So that might be an area, and we're talking about the businesses that are practically right next door.
Yeah. And the other thing we were talking about is we have some trolley level structures, again,
yes,
the trolley did go up Sandy Boulevard. And if you go to the intersection of Sacramento and Sandy, that Keystone building, that's right there that opens up. And
actually the streetcar went all the way, because
it went all the way up Sandy Boulevard.
Well, it connected with another streetcar that went out to Park Rose, I think, or something like that. I wrote it up look at our history book. I wrote it up in the history book.
I researched the routes online, and there were some that went to south of here, but the one, because I was wondering if 64th or 63rd was one of those routes coming in to the Rose City Park Golf Course. It didn't show one.
Yeah, I know. I couldn't find it either, but but it did at one of those streets did touch the upper portion of the golf course. But the trolley went out further on Sandy past us. That was the map that I have shows it further out. And I actually have a book on streetcars at home.
I think it went all the way to 72nd. And
Could
when
be.
I'm
I'll
just thinking.
have to look at the map again.
Okay. Well,
But there
I'm just
was
saying.
behind.
Will you let me stop? Will you let me talk? Please stop running over me. I just want to let you know that there are trolley shaped buildings along the frontage, and we might want, funds to help those businesses retain some of that character if they expand or build out. So I'm just saying, for that level of looking at the TIF, I'm not arguing where the trolley went to or turned.
Well,
I'm just trying to talk about the character, and if we can retain some of that historic character.
I agree with you. I agree. I just like facts to be correct. That's all. And
I don't like being talked over, Jerry, like you're talking over me every time I talk.
Because you keep talking and I can't get a word in edgewise.
I guess we're both bad about that. All right. Sorry about that. Oops. So what else we have on the list? Update. Where are we on the streetcar Montgomery Park to Hollywood?
So I got an email from Barry Manning that essentially said that that we were correct. There isn't any additional study currently being done in the Hollywood area. They're focused on other areas, and he will keep us up to date with what happens in the future.
So that's on the Hollywood hub, or we're talking about the streetcar?
Streetcar.
They're looking at the extension on the other end right now.
Correct. Okay. And I have not got a response from Libby Winter on the Hollywood hub. So I will reach out to her again. Well, I did today, but I still didn't get a response. I'll maybe reach out to somebody else on that project.
Okay, sounds good. Because I'm still concerned about them putting a stop right there at the Providence Park space there. What is it, 44th? Something like
45th.
that? 45th.
Mm-hmm. I am too.
So I'm assuming that they need to get their funding in order, and then they have to start the design process. So they have to get, because they're kind of in limbo now until they get the funding in place. And then
I'm not talking about the construction. I'm talking about doing the traffic study as far as where the buses will.
I assume that's tied into funding also, but I'll see what I can find out.
Yeah, it should be money that's already in place through PBOT or TriMet or both. Okay, Alameda One Way. Now this just came in. They're starting up the mailings on the access there at Alameda and Sandy Boulevard intersection. So
the paintings
talk about slow streets blowing up.
The paintings are on the street.
Okay. That's going to be a spicy one, folks.
A little bit of context. The Beaumont-Wilshire Neighborhood Association is having a conversation around the other end of Alameda. So that would be Fremont and Alameda, where it kind of snakes up to the northwest, and what to do at that intersection, because quite a bit of pretty fast moving through traffic happening east-west on Fremont there. And then the Greenway on Alameda comes up. It's a corridor to Wilshire Park. And so it's had a lot of conflicts. And so they are proposing, they're at least looking into, and they're discussing it in their neighborhood association, what to do at that intersection, just as a heads up.
So Scott is asked to come to a future meeting. When do we want him to come? And how do we inform neighbors around that area?
Well, the neighbors received a card already.
Okay.
Apparently, they said, oh, by the way, we just sent this card out. And again, they don't mention us. They don't mention us as a neighborhood association or us as a land use and transportation committee willing to talk to folks. So it should probably be soon. You
So
want to schedule it for the next meeting?
April. I didn't read all of Scott's email. Do you think he'd be prepared as early as April?
They've got the street painted where they want to put the
I-
barrels in, or the barricades or whatever.
You could, you know,
I'm sitting
I
on
think-
one of them right now.
they said they would do a traffic study. And so I think we want to have that traffic study in hand for this discussion. So if he's prepared with the traffic study in hand to say, okay, if you shut this down, where is the traffic going to go? And how is that going to be handled given the exit points from that point, which would be 54th at Sandy Boulevard and
Siskiyou and 57th.
Siskiyou and 57th, which both are terrible intersections as far as number of crashes. Adding the flow at that point, those points would be dangerous, I think. So the question is, are we making a problem, a non-problem even worse into several problems?
So you'll check with Scott to see if he will have a traffic study and if he'd be prepared to come in April.
Okay.
What it seems like is we're just moving. So TriMet can have an extra minute. We're creating a traffic problem because there's an awful lot of traffic on 57th at certain times of the day. There's an awful lot of traffic. It comes from Columbia Boulevard and Portland Highway.
I still think making a huge traffic circle up at the top of the mountain of that hill makes a lot more sense because you have so many intersections coming in at the same place. And just make it
put George Washington in the middle of it.
or Sacagawea or something, you know. But I just think, you know, what they have down in the Laurelhurst neighborhood with that big traffic circle, that's pretty elegant, but it doesn't have to be that big. But, you know, I think that would help traffic move so much better and without all the stops. So
Let's ask him
I agree.
if they're considering it. It's cheaper to maintain too. You don't have to have lights all over the place and indicators, and who knows, maybe they haven't talked about it.
I'll ask them. Okay, we got 3 minutes left. Check in with members, issues of concern. We didn't go talk much about the Alameda. Oh no, we did talk about that. The contact list, contact information for email list. We decided that there shouldn't be an email list for neighborhood association, land use and transportation committee, that we will just let everybody know that the information's on the website and making sure the website's up to date early. So that's where we're at. Okay. Sorry, I lost my cool a little bit there, Terry. I haven't eaten, and when I bonk, I just get kind of rattled.
Well, as far as an update, nothing new on the park. I mean, on the golf course.
On the golf course, okay.
Yeah, nothing new. We had one meeting and I haven't heard anything from Vincent since then.
Okay. Be good to know when that event's going to happen.
Well, they were looking at July 31st, or there, if that's a Sunday.
Yeah. Oh, that would be great. Okay, that works. Okay. Ben, thank you for all your persistent work with Scott.
Well, I'm happy to do it. Just want to have this be a better neighborhood. I love this neighborhood.
I do too. And I kept on digging, trying to figure out, okay, what is there a historic segment here? We can do a plaque at this intersection where you've got this great view, and I couldn't find anything. So, but anyway, it doesn't mean it's not there somewhere.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Okay.
That's why I'm a favor of slowing down and having thoughtful, like, don't do anything until we know we're doing the right thing and budgeting for the right thing. I'd rather it was a 5-year process than doing the wrong thing next year.
Do it right the first time.
Yeah.
even if it takes longer. I do have one quick question. I'm not sure whether Terry had his question answered about I guess there's some kind of a petition, and were there going to be people's addresses on this for the signatories of the petition?
I have absolutely no idea. I haven't seen it. So
I don't think there are, Susan. No.
Well, at least
There's, I think there's,
cross streets.
I think there's zip codes, but I don't think there's
Well, we've all got the same.
not totally sure.
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily. I would like to see where they live in proximity, cross streets for sure.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I think
don't
that's
necessarily
important.
need
Don't have to have the
addresses,
specific address, but cross streets.
be nice to have, but you
It
know,
would be
we
very
don't regulate what people do in the way of giving us petitions. But you know,
Well, but it
Maybe-
does matter. It does matter. And, you know, when you do public comment in different areas, you know, it's nice to know who's packing the public comments versus those who are in the area and more locally directly involved. So,
and to the point that those of us who have submitted written testimony, we were asked to give our names and addresses.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
we've done, so I think everybody should do the same thing.
I kind of do too.
Thank
All
you.
right. Okay, well, it's after 9. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I move.
I second that.
Yeah.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
everybody.
you.
All right, have a good night.